Imagine helping your daughter buy her dream home, only to discover years later that her husband's reckless choices are gambling it all away. Now, the very papers you signed decades ago might be the only thing standing between disaster and justice. What would you do if the people you love most ignored warnings, lied, and even threatened you in your own home? Stay with me, because this isn't just about money. It's about family, trust, and surprising twists life throws when you least expect them. And before we dive in, a small request. If you love stories that feel like a Sunday afternoon chat over coffee, hit subscribe. You won't want to miss a single moment of this one. Families. We spend half our lives building them up, and the other half trying to stop them from tumbling down like a badly stacked game of dominoes. I'll tell you how it went for me one afternoon, though fair warning, it wasn't the sort of visit where anyone brings out the coffee cake. I stood on the threshold of my daughter's home, trying, rather foolishly as it turned out, to save her from ruin. She met me with a voice tight as a stretched violin string. "Go away or I'll call the police." Her eyes were glistening, not with kindness, but with that cold, wounded anger people wear when they think you've stepped too far into their world. So, I did what fathers sometimes do when their words fail them. I smiled. Oh, not because I felt like smiling, but because it's better than shouting. And I turned on my heel. As I walked away, I dialed the realtor's number. If they were so set on losing that house, I thought, well then perhaps I'd simply help them along. But let me not get ahead of myself. You see, this all began with a certain stack of papers in the company break room. A place already filled with bad coffee and worse lighting. Austin, my son-in-law, had just gone pale as a sheet while staring at those papers. Bank statements, credit reports, little numbers on big lines. Things he never meant for me to see. "Where did you get these?" he demanded, his voice cracking like a boy caught sneaking out past curfew. I told him the truth. The bank had rung my house by mistake. A late payment notice meant for Lindsay's address. That one slip was all it took. And there it was, laid bare in black and white. $53,000 in gambling debts, neatly tied to my daughter's home. He stepped close then, too close. I could smell his cologne, sharp against a nervous sweat he couldn't quite hide. The fluorescent lights above us buzzed like angry wasps. "This doesn't concern you, old man," he said. "Well now, there are some words you simply don't say to a father." I spread the papers across the scar table, as calm as if I were setting out blueprints. "My daughter's about to lose her house, because you can't keep away from poker tables, and it doesn't concern me." The man's watch flashed in the harsh light as he swept the papers aside. They fluttered to the linoleum floor, landing with the sad sound of autumn leaves. "Stay out of my business," he muttered. I bent, gathered them one by one, methodical, steady, the way I'd once gathered plans on a windy job site. "These credit lines are tied to Lindsay's home," I said. "The one she believes is safe." He faltered then, claimed she knew, but the tremor in his voice told another story. And when I pressed, when I mentioned the second mortgage, the home equity loan, even a dip into her 401k, he turned away, stared at the humming vending machine as if it might provide the answers. "I'm handling it," he insisted, "by borrowing more." Ah, yes, the gambler's famous system. Borrow today, pray tomorrow, lose it all by Friday. I even showed him a screenshot of his latest attempt. 30,000 more against the house. He lunged for my phone like a drowning man reaching for driftwood, and for a moment, I saw something more than anger in his eyes. Fear. We went back and forth, as men do when neither wishes to yield. But the truth hung between us like damp laundry. 30 years of my overtime shifts of patched-up shoes and skipped vacations, all of it poured into the foundation of that house. And here he was, playing dice with the walls. I left him standing there, chest heaving, coffee spreading like a dark stain across the table. I left because there was someone else who needed to hear the truth. My daughter. By the time I pulled into her driveway, I'd already planned a conversation. Step by careful step. Show her the papers. Explain the danger. Offer a way out. Simple, really. Only it wasn't. She opened the door before I could knock. Phone pressed her ear. Smile just a touch too practiced. The sort of smile people use when they're trying to convince you everything's fine, though anyone who's lived long enough knows better. Inside, Austin's toys were everywhere. Oversized television glowing blue, controllers scattered across the table, empty cans standing like sentries. The air smelled of expensive candles, and beneath that, something else. Stress, perhaps. You can smell stress in a home if you've known it long enough. We made our way into the kitchen, where bills lay half hidden behind the toaster, as if paper could ever be so easily forgotten. I spread the documents between us like cards in a game I never wanted to play. 53,000, I said softly. All of it tied to this house. Lindsay's face went from white to pink to red, a storm in fast motion. That's impossible, she said. And when I pointed to the signatures, the loans, the mortgages, well, she swept them aside, scattering years of truth across the tile floor. Austin would never risk our house, she whispered, trembling. Then why does the paper say otherwise? I asked, but she was already turning away, clutching at the counter like it might hold her up, and when she turned back, her eyes were shining, not with clarity, but with hurt. You made these up, she said, because you've never liked him. You want to tear us apart. I wanted to tell her no. I only wanted to keep her safe. But I could see in her face, she wasn't ready to hear it. Not yet. And so there we stood, a father with a fistful of truth, and a daughter clinging to the comfort of denial. Now, I'm not sure if you've ever tried reasoning with someone who's already made up their mind, but it's a bit like talking to a brick wall that insists it's listening. That was Lindsay, my little girl, standing in her own kitchen with her hands clamped over her ears like a child refusing to hear the end of a bedtime story. I laid out the evidence anyway. Statements from gambling sites, amounts that added up faster than weeds in the summer garden. 2,000 here, 1,500 there. Month after month, money vanishing into thin air, or rather, into the bottomless pit of Austin's system. Stop it, she said, shaking her head, voice trembling. You're lying. Austin loves me. He would never hurt me. And there it was, the sort of declaration people make when they're trying very hard to convince themselves. I stood slowly, knees grumbling the way they always do these days. Around us, her kitchen felt fragile, as though one wrong word might send the whole room crashing down like scenery in a school play. I'm not lying, sweetheart, I said gently. Don't call me that. Her fingers trembled as they flew over her phone screen, searching for Austin's number as if he might ride in like a knight in shining armor. Get out. Get out of my house right now. Her house. I glanced around. The giant television humming in the corner. The candles that cost more than an old week's groceries. The glossy photographs pinned to the refrigerator where I appeared only in the margins. This house I helped you buy, I said softly. The one I co-signed for. But she raised her phone like a weapon. Get out or I'll call the police. And something inside me went very still then. Not hurt. I'd passed hurt somewhere between the coffee maker and her accusing me of lying. This was something else. Clearer. So I smiled. Not the angry sort, not bitter either. Just calm. Collected my papers one by one, folding each as carefully as I'd once folded blueprints at the job site. Slipped them into my jacket pocket, buttoned it shut. You'll call the police? I said. Yes. But her eyes flickered, just for a moment, a flash of uncertainty. On your father, who's only trying to save your house? You're not trying to save anything. You're trying to ruin my marriage. I paused at the kitchen doorway, looked back at the girl who used to run to me with scraped knees and questions about interest rates. I hope Austin's worth it, I said quietly. He is. And I hope the house is too. I let myself out, walked to my car with measured steps. Through the front window, I caught a glimpse of her, small, almost fragile, framed by heavy curtains and the weight of choices she couldn't yet admit. She clutched the phone to her ear, no doubt calling Austin, warning him about her unreasonable father and his so-called fake documents. My old car started on the first try, as reliable as everything else in my life once had been. As I backed down the driveway, I couldn't help but remember the girl who once sat at the kitchen table with me, pencil in hand, helping balance the checkbook. The same girl who once nodded solemnly when I explained why we paid a little extra on a mortgage each month. Now she looked out from behind glass, a stranger in the very home she'd once dreamed about owning. By the time I reached my house, the quiet felt almost unnatural. I set my keys in a wooden bowl by the door. Lindsay had made it in 7th grade woodshop, her initials carved crookedly in the side. Funny, how even the simplest things can hold the heaviest memories. I moved through rooms that suddenly seemed too large for just me. Put coffee on, because some rituals never change, even when everything else does. As it brewed, I stood at the sink, staring out at the citrus trees heavy with February fruit. Trees I'd tended for years, now offering a harvest I'd likely eat alone. The coffee was strong and black, just as I'd learned to drink it back, when cream was too dear a luxury. I settled into my father's old recliner, mug in hand, and let memory do what it always does. Bring back the years whether you want them or not. I thought of 1994. Lindsay was 7, gap-toothed and curious, forever asking why I worked so many nights. I'd taken extra shifts then, 12 hours at the firm, 6 more at the concrete plant, 18 hours a day, so we could make our mortgage payment 3 days early every month. Why pay extra, Daddy? She'd asked once, sitting on my lap while I filled out the payment stub. Her little finger tracing the numbers I always made just a bit higher than required. Because if we pay a little more now, we'll save later, I told her. And she nodded as though compound interest were the most natural thing in the world. So we'll own the house faster, she said. That's right, sweetheart. Then it'll really be ours. That memory sat bitter on my tongue now, mingling with the taste of cold coffee. All those years of peanut butter sandwiches and patched shoes. All the vacations that never were. The class trip sacrificed so the water heater could be fixed. The endless overtime hours that bought her car, her college, her wedding. And Austin, dear Austin, who'd never worked a late shift in his life, never balanced a checkbook, never chosen groceries over gasoline. Yet somehow, she believed in him more than in me. I set the mug down beside a photograph of Lindsay on her high school graduation day, face lit with pride, ready to stride into a future I'd worked my fingers raw to give her. I did it all for her, I said into quiet. But the words rang oddly hollow. Because that wasn't true anymore, was it? She'd made her choice in that kitchen, when she called me a liar, when she lifted the phone like a weapon, when she put her husband's comfort above her father's truth. And so I had a choice too. I could walk away. Let Austin's debts chew through 30 years of sacrifice. Let them lose the house I'd built with sweat and stubbornness. Or I could fight. Not as a father anymore. That part had been left behind in Lindsay's kitchen. No, I could fight as a man wronged, a man cheated, a man who had every legal right to protect what he'd built. The house settled around me with small creaks, the sound would expanding and sighing with age. Proof, I thought, that careful work endures, even when people don't. You know, some folks live by the rule of saving for a rainy day, while others prefer to spend as though the sun will shine forever. Austin, as you might guess, belonged to the second camp. Borrow against tomorrow, he believed, to pay for today's pleasures. My philosophy was different. Build something steady, brick by brick, so it lasts. Well, it seemed we were about to find out which school of thought would hold up when the storm came. I stood up, stretched out the stiffness in my back, the same muscles that once hauled bags of concrete and crawled under drafty houses to check foundations. My body might complain more these days, but my mind still clicked along with the discipline of an engineer. Problem identification, resource assessment, solution implementation. That's how you fix a cracked wall. Or, as it turned out, a shaky marriage wrapped in debt. Austin and Lindsay thought they had me cornered simply because their names were on the front door. But houses, as I knew better than most, rest on their foundations. And they had forgotten one very important detail. 30 years earlier, when the ink was still fresh and their dreams still shiny, I had added my own name to that foundation. So I did what any careful builder does. I went to the filing cabinet. That cabinet has been with me longer than most friendships. Each folder lined up as neatly as nails in toolbox. Lindsay's house had a folder all its own, stuffed fat with everything from the original mortgage application to the most recent property tax bill. I spread the papers across my desk under the bright lamplight, reading glasses perched on my nose. There was the document I'd half forgotten but never truly lost. The original mortgage application, both our signatures side by side. Lindsay's handwriting still neat and hopeful, mine steady and deliberate. But what made me smile was a little box just above. Co-applicant, Clarence Brooks. And beside it, the words joint and several liability for full loan amount. Ah yes, legal language. Dry as dust of most. But I'd spent a career reading contracts, and I knew the power hiding in those lines. Back in March of 2021, I'd sat across from a loan officer with Lindsay and Austin, listening as she explained every clause. Austin had shifted in his chair, uncomfortable with words like responsibility and default. Lindsay had looked at me with those wide eyes that once could melt steel. "Please, Dad," she whispered, "we'll never miss a payment." So, of course, I'd signed. Fathers do that sort of thing when they still believe they're helping. What I hadn't realized then was that signing also gave me equal footing. Rights not just to carry the debt, but to decide what happened to house if things went sideways. And sideways, my friends, is precisely where we landed. I read the fine print again with a magnifying glass, letting each word settle. In the event of financial distress, all co-applicants retain equal legal standing to initiate protective measures, including foreclosure proceedings for sale or transfer of title. For sale. That was a phrase. Heavy as an anvil and twice as useful. Austin could shout. Lindsay could cry, but neither of them could wish away a co-signer with a pen and a legal right to act. They dismissed me as just Dad, but on paper, I was something far sturdier. I leaned back in the leather chair I bought the year I became supervisor. Funny how furniture holds memories the way houses do. For the first time in weeks, I felt steady. I even scrolled through my phone and found the number of an old acquaintance. Richard Chun, real estate attorney, brother to the loan officer who had witnessed my signature all those years ago. Tomorrow, I'd make some calls. Not as a pleading father, not even as a worried grandfather in waiting, but as a co-owner protecting his investment. Phase 1 had been discovery. Phase 2, reconciliation. Both had failed. Phase 3, well, that would involve people who respected documentation more than excuses. People who didn't cover their ears when the truth became inconvenient. I gathered every paper back into its folder, slid it into its exact place in the cabinet. A tidy desk, a tidy plan. After all, I'd built foundations my whole life. I knew how to make something crumble if the supports weren't sound. And Austin's house of cards was leaning already. I had just settled into my evening routine, the house quiet except for the familiar hum of the refrigerator, when a sharp pounding rattled my front door. 3 knocks, a pause, 3 more. Through the peephole, I caught sight of Austin's face, flushed, distorted, his expensive shirt wrinkled as though he'd been tugging at the collar. I opened the door slowly, chain latch still engaged. And there we were, 2 men staring at each other through a gap no wider than trust itself. Austin arrived at my door like a storm cloud trying to fit itself through a keyhole, loud, unsettled, and far too close for comfort. He pounded, called my name, and demanded the chain be lifted. "Evening, Austin," I said through the narrow gap. The doors opened just enough for conversation. He leaned in, face flushed, voice tight. "Lindsay told me about your little visit. Your fake documents, your conspiracies. Did she also tell you about the $53,000 in gambling debts?" I asked. That did it. His cheeks burned red. "They're not gambling debts," he snapped. "They're investments. Cryptocurrency, real estate ventures. Online poker sites aren't usually listed on the stock exchange." I reminded him, almost gently. He shifted, pacing like a caged animal that suddenly realized the bars aren't moving. His finger jabbed through the crack in the door. "Stay out of our business. No more visits. No more poison in Lindsay's ear." I let him finish, then asked a question I already knew the answer to. "Or what, Austin?" His smile flickered, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Or things might get unpleasant. Lonely old men living alone Accidents happen. Now, threats sound different when you've lived long enough to see them for what they are. His voice was slurred, his cologne sour with alcohol. I'd seen that same nervous tapping of fingers before, in contractors who knew they'd lost a bid. "Are you threatening me, Austin?" "I'm explaining reality," he muttered, though his reality seemed shakier by the second. He straightened his wrinkled shirt as if that might restore dignity, then stalked off to his car. A BMW, sleek and expensive, humming with borrowed money. He drove away too fast, tires squealing, exactly the kind of exit that proves more than hides. I closed the door, slid the deadbolt home, and stood for a moment by the window watching his taillights disappear. And instead of fear, I felt something closer to certainty. His bluster, his threats, his spiraling temper, all to confirm what I already knew. This wasn't about family squabbles anymore. It was about protection. Of the house, the investment, and yes, even of Lindsay. So, I reached for my phone and scrolled a name I'd saved for just such a day. Richard Chun. A good man with a clear head for numbers. Tomorrow, I decided, would be less about feelings and more about facts. Morning light found me in Richard's office, one of those polished glass buildings where the windows stretch floor to ceiling and the charts glow bright on computer screens. He shook my hand firmly, as he had years before when I first sought his help explaining property taxes to Lindsay. "Clarence," he said kindly, "I imagine this isn't a social visit." "It's not," I admitted. "I need a current market analysis." So we set to work. He clicked through data, neighborhood sales, rising values. At last, he leaned back and gave the figure. For $160,000, perhaps a touch more if the right buyer came along. I made my notes. Original purchase, $340. Mortgage still hanging near $290. Add Austin's $53,000 in borrowed debts. Subtract legal fees, commissions. I did the math the way I'd always done. Pencil on paper, numbers marching in neat lines. About $70,000 left, to be divided as the law allowed. Richard's brows knit slightly. "Clarence, are we talking about a for-sale situation?" "Yes," I said quietly. "A legal petition. I was co-signer from the start." He nodded, now seeing the weight of the papers I carried. "That changes things." We spoke of timelines and procedures, and when I left his office, I carried more than numbers, I carried clarity. But numbers are only half the battle. The next stop was a lawyer's office, where the air smelled of polished wood, and the shelves grown with law books that had actually been read. Donald Kessel was younger than I'd expected, mid-40s perhaps, but his movements carried the economy of a man who'd stood before judges and chosen his words carefully. He leafed through my documents, his expression sharpening with each page. Partition actions, he explained, aren't very common in families. More often we see them between business partners or when heirs can't agree on an estate. And what's the difference? I asked. He set the papers down and looked at me squarely. Emotion. Business partners understand spreadsheets. Family members, well, they tend to take things personally. I gave a little nod. He wasn't wrong. Families, after all, are built on memories as much as bricks. And memories don't always settle as neatly as balance sheets. Donald spread the papers across the polished conference table, the way a doctor might lay out an x-ray before giving you the news. "Mr. Brooks," he said, "you've got more rights here than you might realize. You're not just a guarantor. You're a co-owner." I nodded slowly, though the words carried a weight I'd already suspected. Co-owner. Not father, not meddler. Something much sturdier. He tapped a clause with his pen. That means Austin and Lindsay can't refinance, borrow, or sell without your consent. The fact that they did, well, that opens the door for remedies. Partition by sale. The nuclear option. Ah, yes, the nuclear option. Not something a father dreams of bringing against his daughter. But then, I hadn't dreamed of police threats or late-night visits from a son-in-law whose shirt was more wrinkled than his judgment. Donald explained the process. Timelines, fees, outcomes. His voice as steady as a carpenter's level. "Once you file," he said at last, "there's no undoing it. It will change your relationship with your daughter forever." I thought of Lindsay's voice sharp with anger, her threat to call the police. I thought of Austin at my doorstep, eyes wild, talking of accidents. And I thought of 30 years worth of mortgage payments, being fed to poker sites as though they were slot machines. I folded my hands on the table. That relationship, I said quietly, is already broken. He gave a single, understanding nod and began preparing the papers. Monday morning arrived gray and cold, the sort of Florida day that almost pretends it's winter. I dressed with care. My navy suit, the one I'd worn at Lindsay's wedding, and the tie she'd given me one Father's Day long ago. Funny how clothes hold memories, whether we want them to or not. Donald met me in the courthouse parking lot, his leather briefcase worn smooth by years of battles not his own. "Ready?" he asked. "I've been ready since Friday," I said, and I meant it. The courthouse itself was everything you'd expect, columns and limestone, the sort of architecture that insists upon permanence. Inside, the hum of justice, security lines, paper stamps, and tired faces hoping for answers. Divorces, custody hearings, disputes of every sort, families unraveling and restitching, each in their own way. At a small table outside the clerk's office, Donald laid out our petition. My eyes traced each line. My name, not as father, but as plaintiff and co-owner. The house reduced to legal descriptions, liens, encumbrances. Family ties translated into footnotes and filings. "The fee is $450, Donald said, and I wrote the check without a pause. 40 years of steady work had taught me that some problems cost money to solve, and this one was far cheaper than losing everything to Austin's wagers. The clerk stamped our papers. Thunk, thunk, thunk. Each strike of the seal as final as a gavel. "Case number CV, 2025-187, she said briskly. "March 15th, courtroom C." And just like that, the matter was no longer theirs to twist or threaten. The law had taken hold, and it would march forward at its own pace. That evening, I filed the certified copies in my cabinet, behind the original mortgage documents, exactly where they belonged. The folder closed with the tidy satisfaction of a job done right. Then I waited. The phone began its chorus on Thursday. Lindsay's name first, trembling through the voicemail. "Dad, we got some papers today. I don't understand. Please call me." An hour later, Austin. "What kind of game are you playing, old man? You think legal papers scare me? This is family, not a courtroom drama." And then Lindsay again, her voice breaking. "Dad, please." I sat with my coffee, listening as the phone buzzed, until the house grew quiet again. For the first time in weeks, I felt calm. Their calls were full of panic, but mine would be measured. The foundation was set. The process was in motion. And now, it was their turn to discover that when you gamble against solid ground, you're bound to lose. A voicemail. That curious invention that manages to sound both urgent and terribly polite at the same time. Lindsay's voice came through first, trembling with emotion. "Dad, I'm begging you. Austin says you're trying to steal our house. That can't be true. Please call me back." A moment later, another from Austin, sounding as if bluster could cover fear. And then yet again Lindsay, her words tumbling out in a rush of worry and confusion. I listened, nodded slowly, and then pressed delete. All three, clean as that. By Friday, the phones were working harder than the two of them. Austin led with bravado. "This lawsuit is ridiculous. No judge will side with you over family." Ah, yes, the old family trumps everything card. Lindsay, meanwhile, wrote longer messages, laced with affection and panic, tugging at the heartstrings. "Dad, can't we just work this out? I love you, but I love Austin, too. Please don't make me choose." And then, inevitably, Austin shifted from bluff to threat. "You're making a big mistake, bigger than you realize." I showed that one to Donald, my lawyer, who merely gave the kind of calm nod you'd expect from a man who's seen every possible reaction before breakfast. "Standard progression," he said. "First panic, then denial, then anger. The question is whether they actually respond in court. And if they don't," I asked, "then the judge grants you what you've asked for. Default judgment. Simple as that." Saturday, while their calls rattled my phone, I took refuge in my garden. There's something about pruning citrus trees that clears the mind. Sharp clippers, steady hands, and the promise of spring fruit, orange and gold against green leaves. It gave me time to think, time to breathe. Sunday's message from Lindsay was different, calculated. Cool. Dad, Austin spoke to a lawyer. He says this whole petition thing is just a scare tactic. You don't really want to sell the house. You just want attention. So we're ignoring it until you come to your senses. Well, that earned a raised eyebrow and a quiet chuckle from me. I phoned Donald. They think it's a bluff, I said. Perfect, he replied. Let them think that. And so Monday arrived with silence. No calls, no texts, no pleading messages. They decided, with remarkable confidence, that family bonds outweighed property law. But when I checked the courthouse record that afternoon, neither had filed a response. Their silence, I knew, would cost them dearly. By Tuesday, Austin's bravado was already cracking. His voice on voicemail wavered. Look, Clarence, maybe we all got a little heated. Why don't you come over for dinner this weekend? We can work this out like family. Delete. Coffee. A glance out the window at citrus trees bending with fruit. Years of patient tending, slow growth, and steady care had borne results. Austin and Lindsay, by contrast, had chosen impatience and chance. Gambling debts instead of honest work. Threats instead of conversation. Denial instead of responsibility. And now, the consequences were no longer mine to deliver. The court's wheels were turning, slow but sure. Then Wednesday morning brought Donald's voice, measured but serious. We need to talk, he said. And when lawyers use that tone, you listen. In his office that afternoon, he laid out the problem. People like Austin rarely stop at words. Denial becomes anger, and anger, when cornered, can turn desperate. He showed me files, cases where gambling debts had led to vandalism, intimidation, even violence. You're suggesting I might be in danger, I said slowly. I'm suggesting, Donald replied, that moving out of your house for a while might be the wisest course. It hadn't occurred to me, but the moment he said it, I knew he was right. And so that evening I toured modest apartment complexes near downtown. I found one, Palmetto Gardens, furnished, secure, and anonymous enough to let me breathe. A temporary refuge. 3 months at most. The manager handed me keys to Unit 2B, and by Friday morning I'd packed a few suitcases, a box of legal papers, and left my old house behind. I paused before leaving, walking through each room, checking windows, adjusting the thermostat, lingering by the mantel where family photos rested, frozen smiles from simpler times. I didn't take them with me. Some things I decided could wait. The apartment was bare, neutral, almost clinical. No history in the corners, no laugh in the walls. But it was safe. And when I sat in that unfamiliar chair, looking out at a parking lot instead of my garden, I felt something new. Relief. No ringing phone. No accusations or pleas. Just quiet. The legal machinery would continue its slow, inevitable work, whether I live in a house with fruit trees or an anonymous apartment with numbered parking. For the first time in weeks, I could breathe. And so I set my keys down on the counter of Unit 2B, poured myself a cup of coffee, and waited. The next move, whatever it might be, was no longer mine. There's a curious kind of peace that comes from distance. From my little apartment, 6 blocks away from the courthouse clock tower, I could watch the storm unfold without standing in the middle of it. Austin's gambling? That was his burden now. Lindsay's denial? Her choice to carry. For once in my life, I wasn't holding everything together with my own 2 hands. I unpacked my shirts into the dresser one by one. Each fold and drawer reminded me that I had chosen calm over chaos. For 40 years, I've been the reliable one. The fellow who patched leaks, balanced checkbooks, and kept Sunday dinners running on time. Now, for the first time, I was tending to my own problem with the same diligence. And, you know what? It felt liberating. Thursday afternoon, Richard's text chimed in. Appraiser completed. Report filed with the court. Practical as ever. 20 minutes later, the phone began its usual dance. Lindsay first, then Austin. I let them tumble into voicemail while I brewed coffee. Their voices told me more than enough. Lindsay, trembling. Dad, someone came to our house today, measuring, taking pictures. He said it was court-ordered, for a petition sale. Dad, please call me. I'm scared. And Austin, his fury spilling over. What kind of sick game is this, Clarence? You sent some stranger with a clipboard. The neighbors saw him. You're embarrassing us. Delete. Sip of coffee. Then a glance at the court system online. Sure enough, the report was filed, neat as a pin. $437,000, documented down to the last photograph. Thorough, professional, unshakable. More calls, more messages. Lindsay pleading, Austin threatening. Each one as predictable as the last. I almost smiled, knowing they'd never find me at the old house. To them, the rooms must have felt like a stage after the actors left, anger echoing into emptiness. By Friday, the bravado had cracked. Austin's voice smaller now. I talked to a lawyer. He says you can actually force us to sell. We should have answered the court papers. Clarence, please, can we meet somewhere? I spent the afternoon in the courthouse library instead. The quiet hum of fluorescent lights and the steady order of casebooks reminding me that property law doesn't care about family squabbles. It cares about signatures and percentages, about rules followed or ignored. Saturday brought emails instead of calls. Lindsay's tone softened. Maybe I was wrong to threaten you. Maybe Austin borrowed too much. But selling our home will ruin us. Please don't do this. Austin's note followed. I admit it. I have a gambling problem. I'll get help. Just stop the lawsuit. We'll pay you back. I forwarded both to Donald for file. No comment necessary. By Sunday evening, my phone rang 15 times. I turned off the ringer and went to bed. Peaceful sleep, the kind that had eluded me for weeks. Monday morning brought news from Richard. Offers already rolling in. 3 cash buyers. Highest is $425. Guaranteed closing in 30 days. While he spoke, Austin's latest message landed. His voice was thinner now, almost broken, with Lindsay crying softly in the background. Clarence, we can't find you. We asked your neighbors. No one knows. You disappeared like you planned this whole thing. We're gonna lose our house, aren't we? The lawyer says it's too late. 30 days. Please, we were wrong. About the gambling, the threats, everything. Please don't make us homeless. We're family. Family. An interesting word to rediscover when the walls are closing in. It hadn't meant much when Lindsay threatened to call the police, or when Austin came to my door with clenched fists. But now, with the house slipping through their fingers, suddenly family was sacred again. I saved the message, filed it neatly. Evidence, nothing more. The law wasn't swayed by late apologies. The proceedings would continue, just as they should. Tuesday morning, the for sale sign appeared. I didn't see it go up, but Richard sent a photo. Crisp lettering, polished stake, professional to the last detail. Appointments already booked. Buyers eager. By Wednesday, the certified documents reached me at the apartment. Official notices, deadlines, procedures all spelled out. 30 days for them to leave, willingly if possible, with sheriff's escort if not. I fixed myself dinner in that quiet little kitchen, looked out the window at the courthouse clock glowing in the distance, and felt that steady satisfaction that comes when careful planning bears fruit. The storm was still raging, yes, but I was watching from the shore now, warm coffee in hand, safe and steady while the tide did what tides always do. Well, it all moved rather briskly after that. I rang Donald to confirm the next steps, and in that steady, no-nonsense way it is, he assured me everything was proceeding exactly as it should. No frantic motions, no legal wriggling. Either they'd finally accept the reality, or more likely, they'd simply run out of moves. Either way, the train was running on time, and there was nothing to be done about it. By Thursday, Richard phoned with the sort of news that makes you sit down and reach for a notepad. We'd accepted the cash buyer's offer. $425,000. 15-day closing. Not a single contingency in sight. After the dust settled, fees, commissions, mortgage balance. All that remained was a check for $78,000. Not riches, no, but a tidy sum. A kind of compensation for 30 years of paying into a house where my own name had never felt quite welcome. I marked the dates neatly on the calendar, closing on March 28th. Keys to be handed over 3 days prior. And with that, a curious calm settled in my chest. Not joy, not exactly, but the quiet satisfaction of seeing a complicated business finally rounding the last corner. Of course, life never quite moves forward without one last tug from the past. On Friday, Lindsay appeared at the old house. My neighbor, dear Mrs. Patterson, rang me in that soft, concerned way of hers. She sat on your porch for an hour. Clarence looked dreadful, checking her phone again and again. A note left under the door confirmed it. The handwriting was shaky, the message even shakier. Dad, we found an apartment but need help with the deposits. Austin's credit is gone. We'll be homeless in 3 weeks. Please talk to us. Signed, somewhat pitifully, your granddaughter Lindsay. It was a strange little flourish. That signature, as if invoking the word granddaughter, might magically dissolve legal contracts. I filed a note with the others and went back to my apartment, where the weekend passed in quiet peace. By Monday, silence had returned. No calls, no pleas, just the distant sound of moving trucks on windy streets. I wonder whether Austin and Lindsay had managed to secure one themselves, hauling boxes toward a new chapter written in harder ink than they'd expected. And so Thursday arrived. I put on my good suit, the one that still holds a faint smell of mothballs, and gathered the necessary papers. The conference room downtown was as sterile as you might imagine, with fluorescent lights humming their own drearium. I signed here, here, and here. And just like that, 4 decades of entanglement vanished into a neat sum, $78,437. By noon, the funds were sitting comfortably in my account, more money at once than I'd seen since the day I retired. Richard shook my hand with professional cheer. Donald, true to form, offered only 2 words: justice served. Back home, there was one last message waiting. Lindsay's voice softer now. We moved out. Austin's got a job in Jacksonville. I understand about the money, about the gambling, about why you did it. I'm sorry it took losing our house to see it. I hope one day you'll forgive us. I love you. I listened twice. Then I pressed delete. You see, understanding is one thing. Earning reconciliation is quite another. By the weekend, I was walking through condominiums in a golf course community, the sort of place where the residents all seemed to have been teachers, engineers, or the steady sort of souls who believed in saving for tomorrow. Folks who treated documents as binding, not as mere suggestions. I chose a corner unit with a garden view. Sunlight streaming in, the kind of light that makes you believe in fresh starts. Austin and Lindsay had their new beginning in Jacksonville, armed with expensive lessons and a battered sense of consequence. And I had mine, built not from chance or sentiment, but from principles carried out through steady, proper channels. The foundation was firm, the future mine to build, and for the first time in a long while, the horizon looked bright. And so, that chapter closed, not with shouting matches or broken promises, but with ink on paper, lessons learned, and a man finally free to build a life of his own choosing. Funny thing about life, it has a way of reminding us that responsibility, once avoided, always circles back around. If this story gave you something to think about, maybe a smile, maybe a sigh, why not stay a while? Tap that subscribe button. Share your thoughts in the comments. And perhaps even pass this along to a friend who enjoys a good tale told slowly, like a song you never tire of hearing. Until next time, take care of yourself. And remember, even the most ordinary stories can carry extraordinary truths.